South Korea, the US, Japan, and Australia slapped their own sanctions against North Korea on the same day, aiming at those involved in its recent military reconnaissance satellite launch. This is the first time that the four nations have taken this action together. South Korea saw exports increase for a second straight month in November on the back of a turnaround in chip shipments. Israel has resumed its fight in Gaza after a ceasefire expired, saying Hamas had violated the truce. It's December 1st, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with joint actions against North Korea's recent military spy satellite launch. South Korea has slapped sanctions on 11 individuals believed to have played a part in the launch. And this was taken in coordination with a series of more sanctions by the US, Japan, and Australia. This four-way action against Pyongyang is something that's not seen before. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji starts us off.
South Korea has imposed new sanctions targeting 11 North Koreans involved in the regime's satellite and missile development. Newly added to an existing sanctions list are 5 individuals linked to the North satellite program, 4 of whom are at North Korea's National Aerospace Development Administration, Lee Chul-ju, Kim In-bum, Ko Kwan-young, and Choi Myung-soo. Kang Sun, the manager of the Ryongseong Machine Complex, a machinery plant where Kim Jong-un visited last Sunday, was also put on the list. Also added to the list are 6 individuals involved in developing and operating ballistic missiles. They include deputy directors of the North's Munitions Industry Department, Choi Il-hwan and Choi Myung-chul, head of the 727 Research Institute Kim Yong-hwan, Lieutenant General Kim Jun-gyu of the Korean People's Army, manager of the Taesong Machine Factory Choi Byung-wan, and an official at the North Korean Embassy in Russia, Jin Su-nam. South Korea is the first in the world to issue sanctions on 10 of these individuals, except for Jin Su-nam. With the sanctions now in place, those wishing to engage in financial transactions with these individuals must obtain permission from the governor of the Bank of Korea or the Financial Services Commission. Friday's measure was issued in coordination with the US, Japan, and Australia, which all imposed separate sanctions on different North Korean individuals and organizations on the same day.
Australia's participation for the first time in issuing sanctions in coordination with South Korea, the US, and Japan shows the international community's strong commitment that it will not sit idly by while North Korea carries out repeated provocations.
A few hours before South Korea's announcement, the U.S. said it had added a North Korean cyber espionage group, Kim Suk-hee, and 8 foreign-based agents to the sanction list, accusing them of generating revenue and missile-related technology that support Pyongyang's weapons programs. The U.S. State Department said in a statement that this reflects the 4 countries' collective commitment to contesting Pyongyang's illicit and destabilizing activities. Meanwhile, Japan slapped sanctions on 5 individuals and 4 groups, including Kim Suk-hee, and Australia imposed sanctions on 7 individuals and 1 entity. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
The countdown for the launch of the South Korean military's first reconnaissance satellite will kick off on Friday morning in Vandenberg Space Force Base, California. That's early Saturday Korea time. If successful, it'll be the first of 5 indigenously developed ones to be placed in orbit by 2025 with the aim of better monitoring North Korea's activities. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea is set to launch its first locally developed military spy satellite on Friday morning local time from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. The satellite will be carried on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX, an American aerospace company, revealed on Thursday that the launch of the Falcon 9 carrying the Korea 425 mission into low Earth orbit is scheduled for December 1st at 10:19 a.m. The mission was established in 2018 with the aim of securing independent satellite reconnaissance for the country, specifically to detect activities by the North Korean military. The goal is to place 5 domestically developed military spy satellites in orbit by 2025, with the one to be launched on Friday being the first. If the satellite is successfully placed in orbit, it will be a first for the military to secure its own independent reconnaissance asset. The satellite will be able to capture images of major facilities in North Korea every 2 hours. While South Korea looks to boost its surveillance capabilities in space, North Korea has claimed it successfully launched its first spy satellite last week. Choi Min-dang, Arirang News.
On the diplomatic front, President Yoon Suk Yeol is set to make a state visit to the Netherlands later this month, the first ever by a South Korean president. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon covers his agenda.
President Yoon Suk Yeol and First Lady Kim Gun-hee will make a state visit to the Netherlands on December 11th. According to the top office's press release on Friday, this will make Yoon the first South Korean leader to do so in 62 years of bilateral ties. His visit comes as he seeks to strengthen semiconductor cooperation with the European country. In fact, a visit to the headquarters of Dutch chip-making equipment producer ASML with King Willem-Alexander is planned for the first official day after a ceremony and luncheon hosted by the king. The first official day will end with a state dinner. On the second day, President Yoon is set to travel to The Hague, the municipality of the Netherlands, in the morning for a joint meeting with the speakers of the upper and lower houses. He then will have a one-on-one meeting with Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, as the two leaders will likely discuss economic security and semiconductor cooperation. A joint press conference, an MOU signing ceremony, and a government luncheon hosted by the Prime Minister are set to follow as well. The two will also visit the Mauritshuis Museum and the Aegean Peace Museum, which commemorates Korea's independence movement. In the afternoon, the president will return to Amsterdam to attend a meeting with Dutch war veterans and their families at the Amsterdam Royal Palace with the Dutch king. The Netherlands sent over 5,000 troops during the Korean War, which was before the establishment of diplomatic relations. There is also a business forum planned that will be attended by the Korean economic delegation and Dutch corporate representatives. As a last event, there will be a special cultural performance hosted by the South Korean government in Amsterdam with the Dutch king and the queen as the main guests. The top office says the Netherlands shares universal values with Korea such as freedom, human rights, and the rule of law, and is a diplomatic partner in value diplomacy, and that the Netherlands ranked second after Germany as the European country with the highest trade volume with South Korea. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
President Yoon on Friday vetoed the opposition-led pro-labor yellow envelope bill and 3 broadcasting law revisions, marking the third time he has exercised his veto rights since his inauguration. Earlier on Friday, South Korea's cabinet requested parliamentary reconsideration of these bills that were unilaterally passed by the opposition-controlled parliament last month. The yellow envelope bill aims to restrict companies from claiming damages in lawful labor union disputes, while the broadcasting bills aim to limit state influence over public broadcasters. The government has argued that the pro-labor bill could promote illegal strikes, and the broadcasting bills could harm the fairness of broadcasting. And President Yoon has accepted the resignation of Korea Communications Commission Chairman Lee Dong-kwan, and the National Assembly's motion to impeach Lee has now been repealed. Lee shared his intentions to step down ahead of a parliamentary impeachment vote that had been expected to take place earlier today following the introduction of a related motion by opposition lawmakers this week. Speaking to reporters on Friday, Lee claimed his decision seeks to prevent work-related disruptions at the broadcasting watchdog. He had been accused of seeking to strengthen state influence over broadcasting stations. His resignation comes 98 days after his appointment. South Korea again saw an upward trend in exports, with November seeing the biggest volume of outbound shipments this year. It's led by a recovery in chip exports that finally started to increase after a long decline. Park Go-nu has the details.
South Korea's exports rose for the second consecutive month in November. According to the industry ministry on Friday, total exports jumped 7.8% year-on-year last month, to $55.8 billion, the largest so far this year. The ministry attributed this to a surge in outbound shipments of semiconductors, one of the country's biggest export items, which were boosted for the first time in 16 months. It also expects more to come as the price of memory semiconductors has been rising since October, while demand for the chips used in smartphones and computers generating AI is also rising. In addition, 12 other major export items, including automobiles, ships, and secondary batteries, all increased compared to 2022. By region, outbound shipments to 6 out of 9 main receiving countries, such as China and the US, jumped in November. Exports to China were valued at around $11 billion, the largest this year, and hovering above $10 billion for 4 consecutive months, led by the rebound in semiconductors, which account for around 30% of total shipments to China. And thanks to large export volumes of eco-friendly cars to the US, the shipments value reached $10.9 billion last month, also the largest to that country this year. Imports were down around 12% year-on-year to $52 billion, mainly due to a drop in inbound shipments of oil, gas, and coal. South Korea saw a trade balance surplus of $3.8 billion, remaining in the black for the 6th straight month. That's also the largest trade balance surplus in 26 months. The industry ministry said the positive figures were a result of President Yoon's sales diplomacy, despite global difficulties such as high interest rates. The ministry also stated that the surplus was a result of efforts from all levels of government and added the administration will keep up its support.
Positive trade figures in November were earned due to all of South Korea's exporting companies, the citizens, and government departments under the president working as one team. The government will also do its best to lead the Korean economy to grow in 2024.
박건우, Arirang News.
South Korea and Japan have resumed their currency swap arrangement for the first time in 8 years. According to the Ministry of Finance, the Bank of Korea and the Bank of Japan signed on Friday a $10 billion bilateral currency swap deal. The 3-year deal enables both central banks to exchange their local currencies from each other for US dollars in times of emergency. In a joint statement, they stated that the deal aimed at strengthening and complementing other financial safety nets will further bolster cooperation and contribute to regional and global financial stability. The war is brewing again in Gaza. Israel has resumed its fight after a ceasefire expired, saying Hamas had violated the truce. Choi Soo-young has the latest.
Fighting between the Israel Defense Forces and the Palestinian militant group Hamas resumed immediately after the temporary ceasefire ended. The IDF said it had restarted combat operations against Hamas in the Gaza Strip and had launched airstrikes in the northern part of the region. According to Reuters, the Israeli military said that Hamas violated the ceasefire by firing toward Israeli territory. The IDF announced it had shot down a rocket launched from Gaza about an hour before the truce was set to end at 7 a.m. local time. Early in the morning, rocket attack warning sirens sounded in southern Israel, prompting the government to issue a closure order for schools bordering the Gaza Strip. On November 24th, Israel and Hamas agreed to a 4-day ceasefire for the exchange of hostages held by Hamas and Palestinians detained in Israel. Later, they extended the truce twice for 2 days and then 1 day. During the 7-day pause, 110 hostages among 240 kidnapped by Hamas during its October 7th attack were exchanged for 240 Palestinian prisoners among at least 7,000 held in Israeli prisons. Israel also allowed the delivery of humanitarian assistance into the devastated coastal strip. Arab media outlet Al Jazeera mentioned that mediating countries, including Egypt, are still working toward extending the ceasefire. The Hamas attack against Israel from the Gaza Strip on October 7th killed around 1,200 people. Since the war began, more than 14,800 people have been killed in Gaza, including about 6,000 children. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
The United Nations Climate Conference COP28 opened its doors on Thursday in the United Arab Emirates. Delegates agreed to set up a fund to help compensate vulnerable countries coping with losses and damage caused by climate change. Lee Eun-jin has more.
Every year, the COP meets to determine ambition and responsibilities for climate change and to identify and assess measures to address climate change. This year's conference, COP28, is being hosted by the United Arab Emirates. And this year's COP President Sultan Al Jaber shook up the meeting by kicking off the conference with a deal on day one. Delegates agreed to proceed with actualizing a fund to help compensate vulnerable countries coping with loss and damage caused by climate change. Such deals are normally sealed at the last minute after days of negotiations.
Fact that we have been able to achieve such significant milestone in the first day of this COP is unprecedented. This is historic. The fact that we were able to get the agenda voted and agreed on without any delay for those who have been involved in previous COPs, this is just unprecedented.
As Al Jaber celebrated the momentum behind the agenda as historic, Executive Secretary of UN Climate Change Simon Steele also emphasized that the result did not happen overnight. And it was decades of discussions that led to an agreement at COP27 in Egypt in 2022, which ultimately came to fruition this year.
The discussions were challenging. This is 30 years worth of discussion which concluded in Sharm el-Sheikh last year. With today's news on loss and damage gives this UN climate conference a running start.
Following the adoption of the agreement, a handful of countries made pledges for contributions to the startup phase of the fund. Of the 197 countries represented at COP28, the UAE and Germany have each pledged $100 million. Other EU member states have together pledged $125 million, followed by the United Kingdom's pledge of around $50 million, while the United States pledged $17.5 million and Japan $10 million. Several countries had objected to the World Bank engaging in managing the funds, but all parties ultimately agreed on the condition that the World Bank's oversight would be temporary, lasting for 4 years. Discussions and negotiations are expected to continue throughout the 2 weeks of the COP28 conference, which runs until December 12th. Lee Eun-jin, Arirang News.
Time for our weekly arts and culture segment. We have our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin in the studio. Happy Friday, Jin.
Happy Friday, Jungmin.
What do you have for us today?
Well, Jungmin, can you believe that Pororo, the main character of the hit Korean animation, Pororo the Little Penguin, has turned 20 years old?
Not really.
So this Monday, November 27th, marked exactly 20 years since Pororo was first aired on TV. And Pororo's global success has even earned nicknames like President Pororo and the President of the Children. And experts are saying Pororo has paved the way for Korean animations on the global stage. So for this week, let's look back at Pororo's 20-year-long journey and its impact on the world of animation.
It's been 20 years since Pororo, the little penguin, started his adventure with his friends Eddie the fox, Lupi the beaver, Pobi the polar bear, and Kurung the dinosaur. It all started with Pororo's father, the creator Choi Jong-il, who had a vision of making an animation for toddlers.
As Korea entered the animation scene a bit later, I believe that focusing on content for toddlers would be a way to compete with the powerhouse, that is Japan. Choosing animals over humans as the main characters helped sidestep potential cultural barriers when targeting the international market. We specifically went with penguins, an animal loved by children, yet not extensively showcased in animations.
Choi's strategy turned out to be successful. The animation was exported to France the same year it was released, hitting a 47% viewer rating on the French channel TF1. So far, it's been exported to over 180 countries. However, these numbers are not all that Pororo has achieved. It opened a new chapter for Korean animations. Before Pororo, Korean animators were primarily subcontracted by production companies in the US and Japan. But Pororo was made entirely by Korean animators, from character development and plot creation.
In the content industry, one mega hit is crucial for a country to become globally competitive. That was Pororo. Its success comes from tapping into the niche market of toddlers, which was traditionally viewed as less lucrative even in animation powerhouses like the United States and Japan.
After Pororo came Korean originals like Ping Fong's Baby Shark, Laba, Kokomong, and Tayo, the Little Bus, thanks to increased investment. Their global success transformed Korea's animation landscape from a subcontractor to exporter. Despite these strides, the Korean animation market remains largely unexplored due to a heavy focus on marketable kids' content.
Korea could shift its focus to webtoons, as successful cases of turning webtoons into animations in the past will make it easier to attract investment. The combination of a well-loved webtoon and Korea's advanced animation technology means there's a potential to start a fresh wave of success.
This could elevate Korean animations to being a major cultural export item like K-pop and K-dramas.
Pororo, that's interesting. And I've noticed that successful animation like Pororo have extended beyond just the content itself.
You're right. So Dr. Yang, who was mentioned in my report, he said Pororo has kind of introduced a so-called Korean Disney model, which is OSMU, which stands for one source, multi-use. So in the animation industry, revenue generated through merchandise and theme parks based on the animation often surpasses direct sales from animation videos. So for example, Pororo's direct sales contribute only around 10% of total revenue, while the majority, approximately 90%, comes from Pororo merchandise.
Oh, wow. And what other far-reaching benefits could these animations have?
Well, on a global scale, these animations can really enhance Korea's cultural power in the global stage and also national image. So according to the Export-Import Bank of Korea, purchasing content merchandise from Korea has the effect of increasing exports by about 1.8 times the purchase amount. So applying this to Pororo, buying $100 worth of Pororo merchandise can lead to an additional $180 spent on other Korean products.
Our culture correspondent Song Yujin, thank you for your report.
Thank you. The sub-zero cold has continued for 4 days in a row as the Arctic cold moves south. Cold wave warnings are issued in Gangwon-do province, but we're still going to wake up to sub-zero cold morning tomorrow in most regions. This frigid cold will ease gradually from the daytime. With the heavy snowfall watch issued for the mountainous areas of Jeju Island, up to 5 centimeters more snow is in the forecast for the tonight, up to 5 in Jeollado province by end of today. Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces will see light snowfall tomorrow night as well. Please be careful of slipping and falling in these snowy areas. Most regions will see minus figures for the morning hours. Seoul will start at minus 4 degrees Celsius, Daejeon and Gyeongju minus 3. Highs in Seoul will get up to 6 degrees, Daeju and Gwangju 9 degrees Celsius. Temperatures are expected to gradually recover over the weekend, returning back to early winter-like temperatures. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's News Center for tonight. Thanks for watching. A panel session up next.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.
먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
저희 연배에서 이렇게 열정적으로 음악 활동을 할 수 있을까? 이런 상상을 해보면서 또 우리가 그런 길이나 그런 모습을 비춰주자. 재즈를 사랑하시고 즐기시는 분들께 기쁨이나 또 행복감을 이렇게 선사할 수 있는 그런 밴드가 됐으면 좋겠어요.
everyone, it's Friday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. It is getting more and more freezing cold here in South Korea, and on such days it might be better to go and watch a movie in the comfort of a warm theater or be cozy in bed watching something on Netflix or other streaming services. Well, just in time for the really cold winter weather, there are many new releases for people to watch. The historical film 12/12 The Day has already surpassed 3 million tickets sold in just 10 days. There's also the Seoul Independent Film Festival, which kicked off on Thursday. Netflix's monster horror drama Sweet Home is back with its second season, and another much-anticipated title, Gyeongseong Creature, featuring Park Seo-joon, is to be released in 3 weeks. For more on this, we invite Professor Jason Bejovic from Kyungdong University, who is also a film critic. Welcome, Professor.
Well, thank you for having me, as always.
And we also have Professor Jung Ah-reum from Arizona State University. Good to see you, Professor Jung.
Hi, Bo-kyung. Hi, Jason. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Now, Professor Bejovic, before we get to the details of the Seoul Independent Film Festival, I'd like to ask you about Korean indie films' unique characteristics. What distinguishes South Korean indie films from other countries, and what is the latest trend?
Well, it's an interesting question. I've been following Korean independent films for a long time, about 15 years, and it's been fascinating to watch how they have evolved. I guess there's a few things. One aspect that's always I found really interesting is the sheer volume of them. And I mean that in a really good way. I think every industry enters, difficulties, but I think the independent industry is incredibly productive. Sometimes there are dozens released over the course of a year. Even during the pandemic, there are a number of independent films. And I think that's partly because of the education system and the way they train filmmakers here in Korea. So you've got the universities, and then you've got these kind of postgraduate programs. I mean, the Korean Academy of Film Arts is a famous school. Alumni include, of course, Bong Joon-ho, Im Sang-soo, and many others. When Bong Joon-ho was at KAFA, they were making short films, but now they're actually making feature films. So that's one reason why there are a number of films that you see each year. Now, they're often young directors as well. So these young directors, a few years ago, they were born in the 80s. Now we're seeing more filmmakers born in the 1990s. And many of them are incredibly talented. And so these films tend to go to festivals, Busan Film Festival, Jeju Film Festival, and they're films that tackle the themes of young people, not always, but quite often. And Korea has had high employment among young people, and so these films do deal with some of those issues, among many other problems that these young people face. I think what we're seeing more recently, actually, and I've been to Busan this year, I've been to Jeonju, and I think what directors are doing, because often these films are quite bleak, quite depressing, sometimes actually shot during the winter months. And what we're seeing now is humour kind of infused into the narrative. So they're dealing with quite difficult themes, but actually some of them are quite comical. So we've seen that in films this year, including Heritage, which I think is screened at the Busan Film Festival, it's screening also here in Seoul as well. So that deals with the kind of difficulties faced by young people, but also I think the generational kind of differences as well. So, and the film it's got a really interesting sense of humour. So, yeah, Korea has a really vibrant independent sector, but I think it also does illustrate that it's actually really difficult for young filmmakers to kind of make their debuts in the studio system. This is kind of before the streaming era. And so, they're kind of forced to work within the kind of independent sector outside the studio system. Otherwise, if they do make their feature debuts in the commercial sector, then they don't really have much in the way of creative autonomy.
Right, I see. So productivity and films that deal with problems the young people face could be unique characteristics.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see. Now, Professor Jung, now to this year's festival. For indie films, what role has the Seoul Independent Film Festival played, and what does this year's slogan, Dear Life, suggest?
Well, the festival actually has quite a bit of history. It was established in 1975, and it's one of the major film festivals that supports indie films and young filmmakers. And their films kind of push back or challenge normative narratives that you often see in mainstream media. And also the festivals try to help these young filmmakers by matching them up with distributors so that they can gain wider release and exposure. And for this year's slogan, Dear Life, it might suggest the impact that good films could leave on a viewer. And so you could think about the ways in which even after you leave the cinema, a movie could really touch you and could become a source of comfort or inspiration on difficult times.
All right, I see, Professor Jung. Now, Jason, as I told you, the 49th CIF, should I say, kicked off already on Thursday, and it is going to run through next Friday. Among a total of 1,300 films that were submitted, was there anything that stood out to you?
Well, I haven't actually been to the festival myself. I would love to get there, but fortunately, I went to Busan, and a lot of the titles that screen at the Busan International Film Festival, otherwise known as BIF, they also screen in CIF. And some films that I recommend include a film called Concerning My Daughter, which is directed by Lee Min-ang. It's a really interesting film, focuses on this relationship between this mother and daughter, and the daughter moves back in with her mother, and she brings her same-sex partner with her, and so it's about I guess the mother coming to terms with her daughter's relationship with this other young woman, and we see it from kind of both different perspectives, which I found quite interesting. So there's that film. There's also Work to Do, which is more of a kind of realist drama. This film focuses on a young man who he works at this kind of shipbuilding company, and they're having to make layoffs because the company has entered a period of difficulty, and so it's up to him to actually make basically kind of a spreadsheet and decide who needs to be laid off. So it's a very difficult decision or difficult task that he embarks on, and we see him as he struggles with that and how it affects him in the relationship with his colleagues, but also him and his wife. So I really like that. That's highly recommended. There's also the two New Currents film. New Currents is a kind of competition section at Busan, and two of the Korean films that screen there are also screening in CIF. That includes That Summer's Light, which is fantastic. It's a film focusing on a high school student, and she's tasked by her teacher to kind of give an account of what she did over the summer. Now that really surprises him, and so he asks her to write another account, I guess a more truthful account. And so we see her kind of recollections of what happened over the summer. Includes she has a relationship with this friend of hers, and so yeah, that's a really fascinating film. There's also House of the Seasons, which was one of my favourites at Busan. It's a really funny film. It's set in a tofu factory in the middle of nowhere, and yeah, we see the kind of family coming together for a ritual, and so it's a really interesting dynamic because you've got gender kind of roles at play as well, and we see the women, the female characters having to kind of carry out all the tasks, whereas the men are kind of just talking and not really doing very much. And it's a fascinating film, and I just love the humour in it. It's really, really funny. So so there's that and many other films actually over the screening during the festival that I highly recommend.
All right, I see. Well, thank you for your recommendations. A lot to look forward to regarding this independent films. All right, now Professor Jung, now to the movies that hit the theaters. 12/12 The Day, a Korean historical film about a military coup in 1979, is rapidly gaining popularity, surpassing the 3 million audience mark already. For those who might not be familiar with the coup, what was it about?
Yes, so the film was directed by Kim Sung-soo, and it portrays a 9-hour period in 1979. And this was when martial law was declared after the assassination of President Park. And in the film, we see a Defense Security Commander Chun Doo-kwang, who is attempting a military coup, and Hwang Jung-min plays a stellar role as Chun Doo-kwang in the film. And Capital Defense Commander Lee Tae-shin, who is played by Kong Woo-sung, believes that the military should not engage in political political action. So he's trying to stop Chun Doo-kwang in the film.
Right, I see. Well, based on, historical facts our Professor Chung told us, this film could have been, difficult to make it fascinating. But apparently it attracted many moviegoers. What aspects do you believe it did?
Well, it's a very good film. I've been very fortunate to see it. And what I liked about it is how it kind of humanizes the period. I don't mean that the characters are portrayed in ways that we necessarily, certainly the Chun Doo-kwang character, that we feel sympathy for. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that we see them making decisions. So if we see films like A Taxi Driver or The Attorney, which focus on a character played by Song Kang-ho who really carries the kind of the emotional arc of the film, and audiences really connect with that. Whereas here, I think it focuses on the decisions these people made, and so. I found that really, really fascinating because, these people made decisions, for better or for worse, and it really had an effect on history. And I think audiences can identify with that, and as a result, it's actually made a lot of audiences very angry because we see this figure who's trying to exploit a power vacuum, and he's very kind of he's villainous in the film, but conniving. But I think the character played by Hwang Jung-min, I don't think he kind of overkills it, and I think there's this wonderful scene towards the end of the film where he realizes what he's done, and to me it was a very kind of human reaction, and so the character comes across as I guess familiar, human, and that adds resonance to it, and I think it makes people even more angry because ultimately it was decisions that these people made, and it all happened very, very quickly, and it focuses actually on two major characters, on the Chun Doo-kwang character, and it also focuses on this kind of platoon commander, basically the Seoul garrison, so the army that are protecting Seoul, and so that's the Jung Woo-sung character. I mean, he's the one that I think audiences would empathise with. He's the one trying to make the right decisions for the country, and so you have these kind of good and bad characters, and they come up against each other, and you also have all these supporting roles, and so it's a very well-written film. There's a team of 4 writers, including the director, Kim Sung-soo. And so, I mean, it could have done... I mean, I was a bit worried there'd be so many characters and it gets really convoluted and confusing. That's not what happens at all. Actually, it's very kind of coherent and easy to understand. But at the same time, it is a very heavy film, and people are getting quite, angry as they watch it. And that's perfectly understandable, given what subsequently happened as a result of this military coup.
I watched the movie myself, and I really liked it, and I totally agreed that maybe the reason for its popularity is because it humanizes and makes us understand the decision process.
Right, absolutely. And the thing is, if you look at a film like Memories of Murder, which is set in the 1980s, again, we know what happens at the end of the film. It's a film that focuses on the killings in Hwasong between 1986 and the early 1990s. And the killer wasn't found until actually more recently. And the thing is, the detectives in that film, they're unable to catch the serial killer. That's not down to decisions they've made necessarily. It's down to the fact that they're ill-equipped. They've not been given the training because they've been trained otherwise. They've been trained not to track down serial killer. And the thing is, in this film, Soul Spring or 12/12 The Day, it's decisions they make. They have autonomy. They have agency. And so I think, in that sense, that's quite different in the way it tackles history. And so it's quite refreshing, and I think that's why it's connecting.
All right, I see your point, Professor. Now, Professor Chung, as we know, the local film industry has been quite sluggish, and there were not many movies that went over the break-even point. Do you expect this one to be one of those?
I actually do. I'm very surprised to see the film gaining more and more attention. I've been reading a lot of social media posts where people are really enjoying the film. And also I saw the social media challenge, which is going viral. A lot of people are measuring or checking their heartbeat rate increasing in particular moments in the film. Like as Jason mentioned, some people get angry in particular moments and they check their heartbeat, and they also upload it on social media. And so I think based on these reviews and all the social media challenge, I expect more and more people to go to the theater and watch the film.
All right, well, I checked my heartbeat as well. It was like over 130. Well, all right, well, Professor Jang, now up until now, we have been talking about this 12/12 the day, but another major Korean film, Noryang, Deadly Sea, will be released soon. And if I'm correct, this is the last of the film trilogy of Korea's legendary historical figure, Admiral Lee Sun-shin, right? Could you tell us more about the story first?
Yes, the movie is based on the Battle of Noryang from 1598. And like you said, it is Kim Han-min's final installment of the trilogy on the films based on Lee Sun-shin. So 7 years after Japan first invaded Korea, Lee Sun-shin is preparing a battle, the last battle in the Noryang Straits. And so we're going to see how Kim Han-min tackles this last film in the trilogy.
All right, I see. Now, Professor Beteves, as I mentioned earlier, this is the last one of trilogy. So I'd like to ask you, how did the previous two films do? And do you believe this last one will be able to help revitalize this local film industry?
It's a good question, especially given the success of 12/12 today. I mean, hopefully it will generate a lot of momentum so other films can do well. Roaring Current, which is the first film, that still is the most successful Korean film in history. It sold over, what, 17 million tickets.
17 million?
Yeah, 17 million tickets. But the thing is, the success of that film, I think, was somewhat unique. It came in 2014. It came a few months after the Seoul ferry sinking, and there was just a lot of... I mean, the atmosphere during that time was difficult, put it that way, and understandably so. And I think Roaring Currents came at a time when audiences were trying to hook onto something to improve, their morale, and I think that it did so very successfully. And then the subsequent film did pretty well, Hansang. It didn't sell as many tickets, nowhere near. I think around about 7 million tickets. I actually think that the second film is better than Roaring Currents. I don't like Roaring Currents at all. I'll be completely honest with you. It's a bit. Yeah, I mean, it spends a long time building it all up, and I didn't think it was particularly well made. But I did like the second film much more. It was more interesting. I think Park Hae-il, big Korean actor in Korea, his role as the famous admiral, I think, was a little bit more nuanced than Chae Min-sik. I love Chae Min-sik, but it's a very kind of powerful performance in the first film. And so I'll be curious to see what happens with this latest installment. Clearly there is interest. I mean, both films have been very well received by local audiences. I expect it to do at least decent business. The question is how far it will go. All
right, well, let's wait and see. Now, Professor Beteves, we cannot leave out over-the-top services, movies, and dramas. And so, the apocalyptic horror series Sweet Home has returned with the second season after 3 years. And as far as I remember, the first season was quite nice to me, personally, because it had fantastical elements and also it had horrendous, creatures. What do you expect for this season?
I guess a bit more of the same. I mean, dystopian content right now is what Netflix are throwing all their money at. Obviously, I mean, Squid Game, which is not necessarily dystopian per se, but certainly it deals with some of those themes. Right. But yeah, we've seen it in a lot of the content that they're financing, and we'll see that in this second season. Although I understand it, because it basically focuses on this apartment block, doesn't it? And they're kind of trapped inside and coming up against these monsters. And the way, I haven't seen the second season, which drops today, I think around about now, actually. We see the characters kind of escaping from the apartment. And so, yeah, the first season's a lot, I guess there's a lot of, confined spaces, whereas the second season, the next logical step is to kind of, I guess, take the characters out and explore explore them in different kind of surroundings and circumstances. So I'm curious to see how it does. It was the first Korean series to feature in Netflix's top 10. So this is the kind of content that has done well. I mean, genre-driven content, be it movies or dramas, is a big draw internationally. We've seen that in the movies, actually, in the early 2000s with films by Park Chan-wook, Bong Joon-ho, Kim Ji-yoon, these kind of genre masters. And Netflix, I think, understood early on that that's the kind of content that would attract viewers, and that's exactly what's happened with the success of Squid Game, of course, and also Sweet Home and Kingdom, and other series have also done well. The Extraordinary Attorney Woo, for example, which is obviously quite different. But I think by and large, Netflix, the kind of content they're really interested in when it comes to Korea is this genre-driven dystopian fare, and this very much fits that bill.
All right, well, I hope it's good because I'm going to watch it today. All right, well, Professor Jung, another anticipated horror thriller is Gyeongsang Creature, starring Park Seo-joon and Han So-hee. It will be split into 2 parts, the first 7 released on December 22nd and the rest out in January. Do you have any high hopes?
Oh, yes, definitely. As the title already tells us, Gyeongsang, which is the old term for Seoul, it's going to be set in colonial Korea, and it seems that Han So-hee and Park Seo-joon will fight some kind of mysterious, strange creature. And who doesn't love, horror, thriller, colonial history, and Park Seo-joon and Han So-hee? So yes, in addition to binge watching Sweet Home Season 2, I'm also very much looking forward to Gyeongsang Creature.
All right, I see. A lot to look forward to. All right, well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Jung, and thank you, Professor Bejovic, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be next Monday with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the weekend, and goodbye.
Korea. Some people call it the country of Taekwondo.
People are more interested in Korean culture and other aspects of it, and one of those things is Taekwondo.
Surtout, ne commencez jamais le taekwondo, parce que si jamais un jour vous commencez, vous ne pourrez jamais vous arrêter d'en faire.
정말 이렇게 제 인생을